Hi there, it's Phil, and I'm doing a quick video update to update you on where we are with stage 3. What I've done is on this email, there's a link to this video which you're watching now. I've also attached a link to some technical notes with some things you'll want to have a look at. I've also attached an invoice for you for this stage, which if you can pay that once you've checked things over and you're happy, that would be fantastic. And what I'm going to do now is take you into a demo of the application. Okay, so what you're seeing on the right hand side of the screen is my mobile phone, my iPhone, shared up to the desktop. So what you're seeing is exactly what I'm running on my iPhone right now. We've done everything that we said we'd do in stage 3. You did ask for some extras while we were going along. One was language translation, which unfortunately we'd already built the UI in stage 2. So we couldn't really build that into stage 3 without refactoring the UI. We really needed to know about language translation right at the start. But we can, however, move on to that in the next stage and go back and refactor it and re-engineer it into the back end that we've built. So that's not a problem, but it's going to have to be an additional job going into next stages. The other thing that Adrian mentioned was the resizing of images. So when you load up a receipt into the application, into a claim, it wanted to know if we could resize it, shrink it before we sent it back into the back-end server. Now, we haven't looked at that yet. Again, we didn't have time to look at that. But there are some other issues around the way you're using images within the application that I think need to be addressed first. And I'll discuss that when we get into the application. Now, the other thing that we've done as a little bit of an extra, we've done a full ZAP penetration test of the new mobile app. Let me just share up a view of that. And we've fixed any issues that we had with the mobile version. So that ZAP penetration test is fully passed. The new mobile app is absolutely clean and perfect. However, what we did do was do a quick little run on one of your functions on the existing application, and we did find some issues. Let me share that up. Okay, so over on the left you can see this ZAP penetration report. So we ran this on one of your functions, which was expense claim, and it's come back with 2 high-level risks, which is basically saying that potentially your file system is exposed to attack, and also you are potentially exposed to SQL injection. There are some medium risks and there are a handful of low risks. Now this is just on one function, so if the same issues are replicated elsewhere, then you might find that you've got a few things to sort out. Now we've ran this as a bit of an extra on one of your functions because it takes a bit of time to do it, and we haven't done any real big deep tests on it yet because you haven't asked us to. So if you want us to do that as an additional job, that we can, and we can also give you a few sort of hints on what you might want to be looking at to resolve these issues, which I think potentially I would have a look at because, as I say, your file system is potentially exposed and your database. The new app, there's no issues at all. We've made it absolutely clean, so you do not need to worry about the mobile app going forward. Okay, let's shoot into the demo itself. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is log in. We'll log in as an employee first. Now, another issue, you can see on the top of the screen it's saying website not secure in red. Basically, Apple is flagging this URL up as potentially unsecure. So I'm assuming on your client sites they're running this under a SSL certificate, so on a HTTPS domain. If not, they should be. And you might want to do it on your demo system as well, but that's why you're seeing website not secure, because basically it's there's no SSL certificate attached to this domain that Adrian set up for us. Right, let's carry on logging in. Okay, I mean, it's much the same as what you saw before. You've seen a demo before, which was attached to a sort of temporary throwaway PHP backend to test it. This is now hooked into your live database and backend functions. So what you're seeing on here, you'll see on your existing application as well. Now, as we said, we broke up the front to allow for additional functions to be put in. So we've got my expenses. Expenses is what we've worked on. But when we move forward to timesheets and absences, they can slot into these slots that I've already prepared for it. If I go into my expenses, what you're going to see, seen before, you can either view all your claims, your new claims, claims that are pending authorization, rejected and authorized claims, and you can add a new expense. So let's add a new expense. I'll just call it new expense. Okay, I'm going to make it a meal, and the amount was £45. Now we can upload a receipt, so I'm going to press upload receipt, choose file. Now at this point you can either take a photo of receipt or you can get the image from your photo library. I haven't got a receipt, so I'll just go into the photo library and see what's there. Camera roll, I've got a picture of a meal there, so that's good enough because it was a meal. Upload, so that's in. Now the issue with images, which I mentioned before, is that on your database you're storing images with a column type of image. Now unfortunately this has actually been depreciated in .NET. If you see the screen on the left now, this is from Microsoft. This is alert from July last year. So there's a number of fields that have been depreciated and are going to get removed. One of them is image. So in future versions of SQL Server, this data type is going to vanish. So I guess if you're not in control of your client's environments and they are able to upgrade out of your control, then they could potentially upgrade to a version of SQL Server that no longer supports the image data type field, which potentially it means you're not going to be able to load up any new images, and the images that are stored on the database, you're not going to be able to access them. So I wouldn't store them as images anymore. I'd go down a different route. Obviously that means you've got a job of work to do to refactor your application and the database as well, but you are going to hit a problem at some point. I don't know what version of SQL Server is going to come along that's going to remove it, but Microsoft are quite clear that field and that data type and a number of others will be removed in a future version of SQL Server, so that is going to potentially bust your app. So you do need to have a look at that. Right, back to the app. I'm going to create the claim, and we've now got a new claim 179, and it's got the value £45 on it. I'm not going to go into all the delete, add lines and everything like that. You can have a play with that yourself. I'm just going top level now. So I'm going to submit the claim, put in a date, submit that, and that should have gone back into the back end. If I go backwards now, I can see pending authorizations, and I can see my new claim 179 on the top of the screen. So what we'll quickly do, as you can see, you can go through and you can look at all the different claim types, so I'll let you have a play with that. We'll log out now. We'll log in as Jane Watson, so we can see it on the authorization side. Go into expenses, and you can see on the pending tab, David's claim 179 is there waiting to be authorized, and you can see claims that have already been authorized and ones that have been rejected. You can go into the detail, have a look at them. If we go into meal, we can see that receipt, the pie which I ate, and all the details there, and then you can either authorize it or reject it. So it's got all the functionality that you had before. As I said, we've got this filter on the top here, so you can filter on anything. So if I was looking for a particular claim number and I couldn't see it, for instance, I could just type in 171, and there you go, filters it down and finds it. Also it could be on the name, so if I was searching all mine are David Clark, but if you were searching for a particular name, then you could search for David Clark. So it's got that nice extra feature in there that wasn't in the previous application. So, and you've also got the filters on date periods as well, so that's all functioning. You can have a test on that. So got all the functionality you had on expenses, both on the employee side and on the authorization side. So jump into it and have a play with it. It's exactly what you had on the Stage 2 version. You've played with that end to end. Nothing's really changed on the UI. There's a couple of inconsistencies in the UI that we fixed, but basically this is all patched into your back-end architecture, which we'll go into in the next bit of this video. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've had some architecture issues with plugging this all together. It wasn't quite out of the box as we expected and hoped, so we were hoping it would be a bit more plug and play, and we could build our UI, we could build our web service and plug into your back end. And based on that's how we built our original estimate and how long it was going to take, which I think was about 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I think it was 5.5 weeks. But we've probably gone 50 or 60% over that budget, because what we found, and what I'll go into, was a little bit more unstructured, so we weren't able to get that plug and play effect. But we've completed what we said we'd done, and we've done it within the budget we agreed, because that's what we agreed. Now let's have a look at the architecture, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Now what you're seeing on the screen here is basically what I'd hoped to see and hope to build. So on the left you've got your existing desktop application, and on the right you've got your mobile web application. Now the boxes in red is basically the user interface layer. So this is what you're seeing on the screen when you run each of the applications, both the desktop and the mobile application. What traditionally you'd have is a UI level. So what you'd have is a UI level up here, and behind that you'd have an event controller layer, which would deal with the interactions on screen. So that when you press the button, when you go from screen to screen, and that would make requests on the back end to get the data and perform any business logic like saving data or deleting data or submitting a claim. Within this UI level as well, you also have this box here, which is the session data, which is effectively old-fashioned memory, which is temporary storage of information that the UI level is using. Now we were going to build this box on the right, which we have built, which is the mobile version of this, only instead of an event controller we have a web service which takes calls from this new mobile HTML5 layer that we've built, and it has its own session memory data as well. And down on the bottom left, what we were expecting was some business logic functions, which is basically the calls to get the data to display on the screen and take the request to save data and delete data, submit data, and also some helper functions, utilities, common functions, and sort of deep business logic that we could also use. Could have a database access layer, but it doesn't matter if it hasn't, it could be built into these two boxes. But even so, we were expecting to see this, and then underneath, of course, that is the database layer with the SQL server. So what we were expecting to then do, as you can see these arrows here, is to be able to make calls from our web service layer straight into your business logic to get the data for the screens, and also into the helper and utilities. So that's what I mean by out of the box. We were expecting to see some out of the box reusable functions that we could call. So we basically built an estimate, and we did our trial based on that. We were going to build a new UI level with a web service layer, its own memory, that would perform functions. It would basically save data and call data using your existing functions. The problem is we didn't quite find that. So when we dug more into it, what we found is, you can see here, your business logic and database layer, your business logic and database functions that were building these screens were actually embedded within your UI level. So you see this red box around each of these. These are basically protected. They're trapped within that application. Nothing externally can call anything within that red layer. So none of my functions here can break through this red layer. So what we do in a modern application, as you saw in the previous diagram, let's go back to the previous diagram, is that all the business logic and helpers would be decoupled from that UI layer. So anything can call them. So you could build a mobile web app, you can build a native application, it'd be able to call it. Now, I appreciate I'm not in any way criticizing the existing app. It was built some years ago, and it was probably architectured before mobile phones even existed. So it wasn't built to do what we need it to do today. But a modern web application would be set up exactly as I've described here on this screen. But unfortunately, yours isn't at this point in time. So let's go forward again. So we couldn't get at this business logic database layer, and also your helper functions, with one of the main ones being a class called auth stage, which is doing all of the authorizations for expenses and probably timesheets and absences and everything else, but I haven't gone into that yet, but I'm suspecting it does. Also has hook-ins into the UI layer, into the session, into the memory, and that session memory is locked to this UI rather than the mobile web app. So even these helper functions were problematic to to use. Now, our solution to make it work, which is why it's taken longer, is you can see on the bottom right here, we've created a reusable function stack. So all the functions that are in this business logic layer that are embedded in your UI, we've copied and pasted those and built new functions down here which are totally reusable. Those can be reusable via a call from the mobile web service, or if you built a native app, you'd be able to call these as well. And with a little bit of refactoring, you can make your desktop app call them as well. So they're totally reusable. They're not tied to any particular UI, which unfortunately your code is at the moment. Now, the thing we didn't do in terms of auth stage and your helper functions, we've had to leave that as it is. It's quite a complex routine, and we've had to dig into it as it is to try and understand what it does to be able to plug into it. Now, we've directly called it, even though it's got calls into your UI's memory, we have called it here. See this link here, unstable. That's red because it's potentially unstable because of the calls it's making in the UI. It's pushing data to your UI and it's pulling data from your UI. What it should be doing is calls from your UI should be passing data to these helper functions and to these business logic, rather than it pulling it from the UI, because it's pulling it from a fixed UI. It's not pulling it from our UI, it's pulling it from your existing UI. So we have made some hook-ins, but it is unstable. So it's certainly not a reliable production application we've built. It does need work to make it completely stable. But all the functions we've built, and it has taken a bit of time, are totally reusable. So if you want to plug a native app into it at some point, all you got to do is create a web service for the native app and it can use these functions, and with some refactoring your desktop app could as well. So any UI that you want to plug onto the application can reuse the functions we've built, but unfortunately it can't use the ones that you've built. Okay, so going forward, that has impacted on the amount of time that it's taken to build this application. So we did estimates based on what we hoped and what we thought we'd find, but obviously we've gone way over that. We've gone 50 to 60% over what we estimated. So it's not been a very profitable project for us so far. So in terms of going forward, doing the other functions that you want to do, I think the only way we can do it and manage the project is to move to a time and materials model with monthly billing rather than trying to do estimates. Now, we're using Jira Project Management, which you've seen before, Adrian's seen before, because we've let you go in there to raise some bugs if you found them. So we're using that, and literally this is a demonstration screen you're seeing on here. It's not our actual project, but it's very, very similar. Virtually every minute that we spend on this project, we record in Jira, which is why we know exactly how far over estimate we've gone. So we can produce you, if we go to monthly billing, we can produce you a monthly report on exactly what's been done, how the time has been spent. And if you want, I understand obviously you may want to control your monthly budget on this, so you can tell us exactly a cap perhaps on the number of hours that you want us to spend on it each month, so we don't go completely over what your monthly budget is on this project. But we can't really continue doing estimates and fixed cost pricing on this, because clearly there's a lot more to this project and there's a lot of unknowns as we dig through the detail and sort of unravel how this application is currently architected and try to create a bridge from this modern UI into your existing back end, which as I said is coupled to your older VB application. So we can't go on the way we currently are. We would need to go to monthly billing, invoice you every month, but we can produce you a monthly report from Jira, quite detailed. It's exactly what we've done, and as I said, you can cap the amount that you want to spend. So we can talk about that and agree how to go forward with that. In terms of the application itself, the biggest thing that needs to happen is the decoupling of your main business logic functions from your UI. Now these functions here, we've had to decouple those already, and as I said, we've moved them over here because we couldn't get our screens to work without them, because our screens can't pull the data from where you've currently got this business logic and data access. So we've had to rebuild all of those already. And as we move into timesheets and absences, we're going to find that with all of those screens as well. So we're going to be adding more reusable functions into this reusable stack. But the one big thing we'd have to do straight away is regards the auth stage class, which is sitting in this helper function box. As I said, it's unstable at the moment because of the UI hook-ins, the hook-ins into the VB UI. So going forward, it's not going to be a stable solution for building this app. So our suggestion, our recommendation, well, really the only way we can go forward with it is to rewrite it. Well, not rewrite your existing functions because it's working with your existing VB, but to create a new version of it in our reusable stack that both the mobile web app can use, the existing desktop app can use at some point with some refactoring, and as I said, if you built a native app, that would be able to use it too. Now, as we go forward into the other functions, there may be other things that we need to decouple to. So this is what I'm saying about unknowns. I don't know what else we're going to find that we're going to have to decouple from this existing stack that you've got on the left. So there's clearly going to be a lot of unknowns we're going to have to work through. So going forward, as I said, we're going to probably have to remove all the business logic and data access that you've got currently embedded in your UI, and we're going to have to work our way through a number of back-end business functions and decouple those as well. So you've said you want us to move on to employee timesheets and the authorization side, employee absences and the authorization side of that, a screen where the employees can view their pay slips, and also a screen where you can maintain employee addresses and bank details. So we can move on to those, but we're going to have to proceed as we've said and do a lot of decoupling. Now that can be a bit of work. I don't know how much work that is, especially around the auth stage. That seems to be the biggest thing at the moment. And there are a number of ways we can go about it. Either we can just do it, we can figure out what it's doing and rebuild it, re-engineer it ourselves. And we have done a lot of work in trying to understand what it does because we've had to make this work. So we can continue doing that. Or you can get Adrian to completely rewrite it for us. And we basically tell him what we need and he could build it for us. But I don't know how that's going to impact on his time. Or we do it sort of halfway where we rebuild it, but we don't waste our time. If we get stuck at any point, we don't spend too much time trying to figure it out. We pull information from him straight away. So that would save a bit of time. So there's sort of three paths. Either if Adrian is busy, we'll just work it out ourselves, but it could take a bit longer on our side, cost you a bit more money. Or he can totally do it for us under our instruction. Or we'll do it ourselves, but we'll use some of his time, as much time you can allow him to give us. The other big area is the development environment. Now, what Adrian did for us, he gave us some access via remote desktop to a server environment where we've been able to write back-end code and work with the database, view the database, etc. But with remote desktop, only one of us can get on there at the same time. So that's actually slowed us up quite considerably. We've divided up the work between myself and Ron because there's actually been quite a lot of investigative work to do to make this work. So one of us has been doing that while one of us has been building. But as we go forward into the next stages, we really need to both be coding at the same time. So remote desktop access isn't going to work. So going forward, we're going to need to set up local development environments on our own PC that mimic what you've got on that development server. Now for that, I think we're definitely going to need some of Adrian's help to set that up. I don't know how you deal with, for instance, customer deployments, but we're going to have to do a similar thing. So whatever you do for your customers, we're going to need you to explain that to us so that we can do it too. If we have to work it out from scratch, it's going to take a bit of time and cost more money. So before we move on to the next stages, we're going to have to liaise with Adrian and decide how we're going to set up these local development environments. I'm sure Adrian's got a local development environment on his own PC, so whatever he's done, we need to do as well. Okay, so that's basically it. So if you want to take a look at what we've built, as I said, it should be exactly the same as what you saw in stage 2, only it's hooked into your backend instead of our temporary backend. As I said, I've attached an invoice, so if you can settle that once you're happy, and then start having to think about what you want us to do in the next stages. There will be an initial block of work that needs to be done, as I said, to set up the development environments, also to look at language translations, and also looking at how to rebuild, re-engineer, or stage. So we could proceed onto those bits straight away, in particularly the language translations, but as I say, development environments as well. So if you haven't quite specced out exactly what you want for timesheets and absences yet, then once we've agreed on a monthly format on how we're going to work, manage the project and bill it, then we can move on to those initial bits straight away. And as soon as you know what you're doing on timesheets and absences and you've got some ideas, some sort of basic specs for us, we can move on to those. Going forward, we won't do 3 stages for those, because basically the first stage initially in this particular project was basically how we're going to design, layout, and how these screens would flow. I presume now you're happy with these screens, so it's basically about plugging timesheets and absences straight into them. So what we do is we do storyboards of how those desktop screens would translate onto mobile. We do that stage 1 that we did in expenses to storyboard it, probably in a PowerPoint. And when you were happy with that flow, we'd then go straight into build it. We wouldn't do a stage 2 demo as we did in the last stage. So that would save a block of cash, because I don't think that's needed going forward, because you're already happy with the way we've built and engineered the screens and how they flow. So there's going to be nothing new. So there's no point doing that middle stage now. So let us know what you think. Have a play with it, and we'll talk soon.